First, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, as its first vice president, who has no job, thank goodness, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this press briefing. The elders have played a very important role in the world as the elder statesmen and women as advisors for many years since they were established by the late, great Nelson Mandela. So first, let me just do brief introductions. Mary Robinson, to the far left, was the president of Ireland and then UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. To her right, Zeid Al-Hussein was also High Commissioner for Human Rights and is now head of the International Peace Institute right across the street from the UN and very associated with it. And to my immediate left is Nobel Peace Laureate Juan Manuel Santos, who was the president of Colombia and played a key role in bringing an end to a decades-old war. So my idea was that you would each speak for no more than 5 minutes, and then we'd have time for questions. Mary, you want to start?
Well, Juan Manuel is now our chair.
Okay, oh, that's right.
Ladies first.
Well, I think I begin by saying that the elders were very pleased to be invited, the three of us, to speak at the opening session this morning of this conference co-organized by France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And we listened to the working groups giving their report. And I think we were, pleasantly pleased that there was more substance than we had feared. Yes, it's words still. We need action, but there were specific words, and I think that's quite important. We praised President Macron for the step he took as a member of the G7 in recognizing Palestine, and of course we urged other states to recognize. But basically, we pointed out the terrible humanitarian situation, the fact that so many countries now believe that, and so many organizations believe that, sadly, this government in Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. And we spoke in different contexts. I spoke particularly about the law, citing, of course, the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, the illegal occupation, the large settlements, bombardments, etc. And I think we saw this morning the detailed work, and we heard this afternoon some of the presidents who are present and prime ministers speaking. So it's a moment to build on when we can hopefully see a real commitment to the two-state solution in practical, real terms. And we set out a number of issues like no more armaments, proper sanctions, collective measures by the European Union in particular, given that there is a clear breach of Article 2 of the Europe-Israel Association Agreement. So there were many issues that were covered, and I think it's a real opportunity to build on today and towards the summit in New York in September.
Thank you very much, Juan Manuel, who is the chair of the elders. Mary Robinson was a previous chair. Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you very much for having us at this very... Two states, one homeland, and it's a land for all, or ALPHA is the acronym for it. And the moment we came across the Palestinians and Israelis who were working on it, it took us a few times to hear it, and the more we heard it, the more we thought this could have some merit in it. Because basically it anchors the two-state solution in an end to the occupation. Every square centimeter of the occupation would have to end. But there not being lengthy swap negotiations, there's an arrangement which seemed to be quite original. And then also a solution to the Palestinian refugee crisis, which, as many of you know, was not really dealt with by Oslo in a comprehensive way. And also elimination of a long-term demographic threat to the state of Israel. And this plan, A Land for All, to us seemed to solve all of these issues in a way that's really quite dramatic. And so we tried to give expression to that in the briefing. It's not an elders plan. I think the very strength of it is that it is being driven by Israelis and Palestinians themselves, activists and lawyers. And we thought that it's important that the conference understand the creative thinking that's going on outside of the UN, because of course we want a stabilization of 60 days and then a longer stabilization and end to the absolutely appalling conditions in Gaza. I mean, that absolutely has to happen. And we want to see a two-state solution as an end goal, but understand it in practical terms, how it would actually take place. And so we gave expression to that.
Thank you all very much. Before I open it to questions, when you ask a question, would you please introduce yourself and your media organization? And if you're directing it at one of the three panelists, please state whom. Yvonne, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Yvonne Murray with RTE News, Ireland's national broadcaster. And thank you very much for the briefing today. I'm going to ask the obvious question. Two critical actors not in the room today, Israel and the United States. How do you get around the fact that they're not participating? How do you push it forward? Do you feel that the UN is shouting into the void when everybody else is there, but not these two main players? Thank you. That's for everybody. The question's for everybody.
I think the Irish former president needs to answer that.
It's true that neither the United States nor Israel were taking part or will be taking part tomorrow. But I think it's really important that so many were there for the working groups this morning and in the General Assembly this afternoon. I must say, I've attended a lot of UN meetings in my time, needless to say. I felt, particularly this morning when the working groups were reporting, there was such attention to the details from each working group, and there was a kind of, the room was absolutely full. There was a real pressure of, we've got to move forward on this at last. A real sense, and I think that can't be ignored, even by a powerful United States supporting Israel. The current Israel government. They can't ignore, and of course they particularly can't ignore, the widespread sense now of an unfolding genocide. And the starvation of children, of women, pregnant women, I mean, just the shocking images that we're seeing live coming out of every day that are causing such distress to so many people around the world because they can't bear to see this happening without action. And I think there was a real sense that maybe now the situation has reached the bottom and it's time to really work on this two-state solution.
Can I?
I would like to add, after the Hamas terrible attack on civilians in Israel, the Prime Minister Netanyahu came out and said, I am going to destroy Hamas. Not one of their members will be left, more or less, that's what he said. That was a major strategic mistake. Hamas is more of a cause, and every militant that is killed, 2 new militants are born. And after more than 2 years, what we have seen is that that major strategic mistake is starting to cost Israel a lot. And the Jewish people outside of Israel, in Israel and in the US, what I feel is they're more and more concerned for what is going to happen in the future with them. What is happening is really destroying the image that they had. And I think that pressure will hopefully sooner than later will have an effect, and that will facilitate a negotiation. And also in the US, you see it all around. When the people see what is happening, the man-made famine, the humanitarian tragedy, people are reacting more and more. And so also within the US, I think the trend will hopefully lead us to a real and hopefully profound negotiation.
Zeid?
Well, your point is well taken, Yvonne. I mean, it's regrettable that the United States and Israel did not participate. The intelligence about what it is that the French government and the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are doing is that, I don't know if you felt it, but certainly for those of us who remember the Madrid peace conference, there was a quality to it like that. You had all these countries who were co-chairing different roundtables or working groups involved in the sort of production of thought on a two-state solution. We've grown so accustomed. I mean, when you look at Camp David II and after Camp David II, it was a bilateral negotiation between Palestinians and Israelis. And here we've gone back to almost Madrid, which is really clever. And it's really clever of the French and the kingdom to choose this path and to see the involvement that Mary was speaking of. At some stage, we hope that the US and the Israelis will see fit to join. We have a declaration coming out, and we'll see then what happens post the declaration. But this involvement is very encouraging, I think, on the part of many countries.
Let me start with Ephraim.
Thank you so much for this briefing. My name is Ephraim Kosaifi from Arab News Daily. I heard you, Ms. Robinson, today in your remarks. One of the things you called for, you said was necessary, is to halt arms export to Israel. That has not happened in the past 2 years from any side. How realistic is that demand right now? Do you envision any scenario in which we could see it happen, especially that we haven't seen any significant sanctions even to begin with? Thank you.
The only scenario that I can think of is if President Trump were to try to say to Prime Minister Netanyahu, you've got to stop this starvation. You've got to let far more aid in, and Netanyahu doesn't listen to him. that possibly might be when the lever that has always been there of the United States to influence Israel will be used. It should have been used from the very beginning by President Biden. It should have been used. Sadly wasn't. But it could be that this would be the point where the realization that the United States is becoming complicit in a genocide, that could be enough.
Pamela?
Thank you. You're going right down the line. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you all. I know you all from way back, and all wise words. It's Pamela Falk from, I don't know, today it's France 24, but it's U.S. News and World Report here at the UN. My question is, what they focused on today was what's next. I mean, there was, at least at the press conference with the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Al-Saud and Barrot from France. What's next? And they both were very clear that it cannot be Hamas, that Hamas has to disarm, both of them said it, and then also not be part of the next government. And that seems to be one of, for good reason, the thorns for peace as far as Israel is concerned, and the threat. They both, I don't know if I saw the real one or the final one, but the outcome document says disarm Hamas. And Al-Saud said diplomatically. Now, could you explain to me how you disarm someone diplomatically? Thank you. I live in New York City, so I wouldn't try.
Well, the pressure on Hamas, and that's where, for example, Iran might come in, and that's why I say that we could maybe take the opportunity to have a more comprehensive negotiation with more actors besides Palestine and Israel. But when you say what step is needed right now, the first step is a ceasefire, but that's not enough. And from there, you have to build. There are different pathways, different paths that you can take, but to have a sustainable peace, you need much more. And but to have that negotiation, you need a ceasefire. It's a dynamic process that you have to sort of regulate with the different actors, and I think that is possible. Hamas will eventually understand that if everybody wants to have a sustainable peace, they have to play around. They have to play along, and they will be pressed militarily, but especially politically. And I think the Palestinian people will be also interested in having a sustainable peace in the long run. So I am optimistic that Hamas will be part and has to be part of the solution.
Go ahead.
So for all of you former war correspondents, you know very well that there's always something that a party to a conflict wants. And a mediator's job is to understand what they want. It could be the return of the remains of dead fighters. It could be the whereabouts of prisoners. It could be the whereabouts of assets. It could be monies that they need access to. It could be medical support that they need. In all conflicts, there is something that each party to the conflict wants. And so I think Prince Faisal, when he said that, he's probably alluding to a combination of different factors, which one would suppose the Qataris in the main, because they're there with the Egyptians and the US, that they're the ones who are looking at the mix of incentives and disincentives as to how you get there. But it's common in conflicts to understand that there's a number of things that each side wants, and then finding the right combination to make it work.
Thank you, Excellencies, very much. My name is Ahmed Fatih of ATN News. Apart from the diplomatic coating of the meetings and the reports submitted by the working groups, and frankly, it's all déjà vu. We have seen it, we have heard the same arguments about quotations from international law, etc. But in practice, it doesn't have any weight on the ground. You can have 191 member states supporting and voting in favor of, there is no mention how you're going to impose or enforce this armament. We have a total hijacking of the Gaza Strip by Hamas is going for years. I don't know if the next elections, which President Abbas promised to carry, will bring a different outcome. My question to you, that what are the tools that can be used into enforcing the consensus about establishing a Palestinian state? And a question for President Santos, what were your experience gained during the negotiations with the FARC after 4 decades of civil war that can be applied to the situation between Israel and Palestine vis-à-vis Hamas attempts for minimizing the role? Thank you.
Well, in every conflict, you need to use a carrot and a stick. And here you have to use also a carrot and a stick. There's no way that only with carrots you will change the situation, and only with sticks you will change the situation. So I think that if there is widespread support for a solution, and that's why I mentioned Iran. If we have convinced, and this is part of the negotiation, Iran to be present, the pressure on Hamas would be hopefully sufficient for Hamas to accept a situation where they will not be the determinants of the Palestinian future government. That is the objective. I think it is possible, and we have to try to reach that objective. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to have a long-term sustainable solution. In the case of Colombia, everybody thought it was impossible. All my predecessors failed before. But, as I said at the beginning, Mandela's sentence, everything is impossible until it's possible, until it happens. And I think that we are, because of the dramatic situation that we have seen in the recent past, and the suffering that the world has been seeing every single day, that those circumstances will help approach a sustainable solution.
Could I just say, I don't think it is déjà vu because of what we heard this morning from the working groups. They were very specific about a number of things. And I think if, apart from the United States, if other countries would immediately halt all arms transfers, the United Kingdom, France, other countries, if they would hold accountable Hamas, yes, and other Palestinian groups, because the right to resist occupation doesn't justify targeting Israeli civilians. They could expand the sanctions against Israeli leaders. who are responsible for the systematic violations and against violent settlers and entities funding illegal settlements. This can be done by the countries who are part of these working groups. They could cease any assistance to or trade with illegal settlements. They could review existing and future trade cooperation with Israel. It's notable that although Article 2 of the association agreement between the European Union and Israel has been violated, there has been no collective action by the EU. That has to change. And this is what we're seeing, at least the beginnings of concrete steps, which in their own way create a momentum. And of course, recognition is the key one. 12 countries, I think France would be the 12th country of the EU to recognize, but the first G7 country when it does it in September. Other EU countries should be recognizing. All of this will create much more momentum. So I don't think it's déjà vu, nor do I think it's a done deal by any manner of means, but it is more serious than, frankly, we had kind of thought. So let's not undermine the efforts that are being made, because they are efforts that are going to show some concrete steps being taken, and I think that is important.
Can I just add a psychological point that I was a diplomat here for 20 years, and you hear repetition, so much repetition. I think if you're here long enough, you suffer from a form of PTSD. So I think when you leave and then come back, you do notice the changes that Mary was speaking of. So.
Any other questions?
Say something. We're looking for deliverables.
I'm coming back.
Thank you, Edie. Hello, my name is Mercedes Gallego from the Spanish newspaper El Correo. I have a couple of questions for Mrs. Robinson. You mentioned several times genocide, which happens to be controversial because it's not official. I would like to get your explanation. I mean, I think for many it's pretty obvious, but I would like to get your explanation of why do you choose that word. And for Mr. Santos, you said this morning that in Colombia you understood the temptation of achieving peace through war, but you learned from that. What do you think it needs to happen for Israeli people to understand that that's not the way that is going to bring them peace? Thank you very much.
On the issue of genocide, yes, that's for the courts to determine, and it is before the International Court of Justice because of the South African case. There is a growing sense of an unfolding genocide. It's referenced. I particularly admired the huge courage of the two Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and the Physicians for Human Rights of Israel, coming out with reports just this morning that call what their government is doing, this very right-wing, this very extremist government, genocide. That must be incredibly brave, incredibly courageous, and the same four human rights organizations that I met when we went as elders, Ban Ki-moon and myself, in June 2023 to Tel Aviv and East Jerusalem and Ramallah. But in Tel Aviv, we met with four human rights Israeli organizations, including B'Tselem, including Breaking the Silence. And all four of them said to us at that point, sadly, this government is committing apartheid against the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, apartheid. Now it has moved to B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights saying unfortunately now, in our view, it's genocide. I have also expressed a personal opinion elsewhere, so I did it this morning to be consistent, that I believe, but I know it's for a court to determine.
I will tell you an experience that I had. My predecessor was very much for finishing the FARC and not negotiating. He said, you don't negotiate with terrorism. But a former commander of the army came to me when I became president and said, listen, I know that you want peace. You should treat the FARC not as your enemies, but as your adversaries. And I asked him, and what is the difference? And he said, there's a great difference. Enemies, you try to eliminate them, do away with them completely. Adversaries, you beat them because you're going to have to live with them for the rest of your life. That made a tremendous impression. And I changed the culture of the military, humanized the war, and that gave our military much more legitimacy with the communities, and even with the FARC. They afterwards recognized that. So an approach to eliminate, that's why I say that a military solution by itself is, in the long run, fruitless. You need, of course, the stick, but you also need the human aspect in order for the peace to be sustainable in the future. That experience I had in Colombia, and it worked.
Evelyn?
Evelyn Leopold, Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists. I think I've met 2 out of 3 of you over the years when we were all children. But, you know, the late Mohammed Sanoun, who you remember, who was ambassador to everything, including this organization, said he goes through the list of conflicts in the world, and this one was the worst one to solve, and kept on going on and on and on. So I'm feeling much more optimistic listening to a lot of the discussion today. 2 points. One, can you define the declaration a bit further? And secondly, can anything be done until this president is out of office, or at least has some opposition, because the Israeli government will count on him. And it was good hearing you. Thank you.
So thank you, Evelyn. I think really the declaration needs to be commented on by the 2 conveners, the 2 co-chairs. They're the ones that are assembling it. One hopes, as was mentioned earlier, that it won't be the end point, but the launch of a different way of thinking. Certainly the civil society groups that we're speaking to, the Palestinians and the Israelis, who haven't stopped because of the terrible conditions in Gaza or the West Bank, they're looking deep into some of these questions, which is really encouraging, because if, as is so often the case, something unexpected happens, and we are so bad at predicting things, we are very bad at predicting things, suddenly, unexpectedly, you have a window where something can happen. The Palestinians and the Israelis who are thinking about these issues deep need to be ready. There won't be time to waste. You can't just assemble a conference and say, well, we need to now get the 2-state solution moving. What do we do? Right? What are the precise steps as how you will do this? And the very technical legal issues. And I mean, all of that needs to be thought through, and they're working on this, and that's, I think, very encouraging. But I think it's for France and Saudi Arabia to really respond to the question of the declaration. Our hope is that it creates a tail, and there's a lot of movement on the basis of what we saw today.
Could I just thank you for mentioning Mohammed Sanoun. I first met him when I went as president in 1992 to Somalia, which was suffering from a famine caused by warlords who were stopping the food getting to people. And he was the head of the UN there, and I kept in touch with him over the years. He was a great man.
Sanoun made it a point to meet me. His subject was not the Palestinian-Israeli thing, but freedom for Algeria. And I was even invited to sit with the Algerians when Mandela came to the United Nations. But there have been some interesting people here. But I will find out about that declaration, and thank you very much. I haven't been this optimistic for years.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you. For President Santos, you said earlier that one mistake was that Hamas is not just an organization, a terrorist organization, but a cause. How is that going to play in this two-state solution where the premise is that Hamas cannot be part of that?
No, certain causes in history teaches that become obsolete when circumstances change. And hopefully the cause that moved Hamas, if there is an agreement, will become, in a way, obsolete. That's what I would say to answer your...
It seems to be a premise of like a requirement to negotiate the two-state solution.
No.
Eliminate Hamas from the government and from the society.
But Hamas can also change. Hamas can disarm. Hamas can become a political factor among the whole of the Palestinian structure without being the one that imposes, because of its military strength, its will. I believe that if there is a negotiation and the pressure is correct, that Hamas will also evolve into something which would allow Hamas to be part of the solution without being the determinant factor and without being a spoiler or disruptive force.
I want to thank you all for coming, and I especially want to thank our panelists for a very enlightening press conference. And let's hope we all live to see peace in the Middle East sooner rather than later.
I must say I was a bit afraid because our moderator, in my one past experience, she told Ban Ki-moon, he was standing there, please sit down. and I said, my God, I thought she was going to be very, very harsh.
I hate to admit it, but it's true.